What happens when one of the most controversial figures in modern royalty sits down with America's most uncompromising news anchor? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle faces off against George Stephanopoulos in what started as a standard promotional appearance but quickly spiraled into television chaos. The tension was palpable from the moment she walked onto the Good Morning America set, but nobody could have predicted the explosive confrontation that would leave viewers speechless, and the Duchess of Sussex storming off in a fury that shook the entire studio. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when years of carefully crafted public relations meet the unforgiving scrutiny of investigative journalism. The atmosphere in the GMA studio was electric as Meghan Markle settled into the interview chair across from George Stephanopoulos. What was supposed to be a straightforward discussion about her latest charitable initiatives quickly revealed itself to be something far more treacherous. Stephanopoulos, known for his razor-sharp questioning and refusal to accept political spin, had clearly done his homework. The veteran journalist's eyes held that familiar intensity that had made presidents squirm and celebrities flee mid-interview. "Duchess, thank you for joining us this morning," Stephanopoulos began, his tone deceptively warm as cameras rolled live to millions of viewers across America. But seasoned observers of the veteran anchor knew that cordial opening was merely the calm before the storm. Meghan smiled that practiced media smile, the one that had been perfected through years of Hollywood training and royal coaching. "Thank you for having me, George. It's wonderful to be here to discuss the important work we're doing with the Arkwell Foundation." The pleasantries lasted exactly 47 seconds. Stephanopoulos leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting to that prosecutorial demeanor that had made him legendary in Washington circles. "Before we discuss your current projects, I think our viewers deserve some clarity on recent revelations. Court documents filed last week in London suggest there are significant discrepancies in testimony you provided during your landmark privacy lawsuit. How do you respond to allegations that you may have misled the court about your cooperation with the authors of Finding Freedom?" The smile froze on Meghan's face. For just a moment, the carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing a flash of something far more volatile underneath. "I'm sorry, George, but I thought we were here to discuss my humanitarian work, not to relitigate settled legal matters." "But these aren't settled matters, are they?" Stephanopoulos pressed, consulting his notes with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. "The Court of Appeal specifically noted concerns about the reliability of your evidence. That's not exactly ancient history when it directly impacts your credibility as a public figure, asking Americans to support your causes." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Meghan's posture stiffened, and her media training began to show cracks under the relentless pressure. "George, I find it deeply disappointing that instead of focusing on the positive impact we're making in communities across America, you're choosing to dredge up tabloid talking points that have been thoroughly debunked." "Tabloid talking points?" Stephanopoulos' eyebrows rose with the kind of practiced incredulity that had earned him respect across the political spectrum. "These are findings from Her Majesty's Court of Appeal, not gossip columns. The judges specifically stated they had concerns about the appellant's evidence and noted inconsistencies in your testimony. Are you suggesting the British judiciary is spreading tabloid rumors?" The tension was now visible to even the most casual viewer. Meghan's hands, previously relaxed in her lap, had formed subtle fists. Her breathing had changed, becoming more shallow and rapid. The professional smile had completely vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that suggested she was fighting to maintain composure. "What I'm suggesting, George, is that there's a broader pattern here of trying to undermine any woman who speaks truth to power." She shot back, her voice carrying the first real edge of anger. "This is exactly the kind of hostile questioning that drove me away from public life in the first place." Stephanopoulos didn't flinch. If anything, the pushback seemed to energize him, Like a boxer who'd found his opponent's weakness. But you haven't left public life, have you? You're actively courting media attention, signing deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and asking Americans to trust you with their charitable donations. Don't you think that level of public engagement comes with accountability? Accountability? Meghan's voice rose just enough to make the sound engineers glance nervously at their levels. Or is this just another attempt to silence a woman who refuses to stay quiet about the racism and institutional bullying she experienced? The studio fell silent, except for the hum of cameras and the barely audible whisper of air conditioning. Even the usually bustling production crew seemed to sense they were witnessing something unprecedented. Stephanopoulos paused, but it wasn't hesitation. It was the calculated pause of a master interviewer who had just been handed exactly the opening he'd been waiting for. "Let's talk about that," he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of controlled intensity that made the moment feel like a loaded weapon being cocked. "Because your allegations of racism have had profound consequences for the British royal family and the Commonwealth realms. But when pressed for specifics, you've been remarkably vague. Don't you think the public deserves concrete details about these serious accusations?" That's when everything began to unravel, and what happened next would shock viewers and change the trajectory of the entire interview in ways nobody could have anticipated. Meghan's eyes flashed with unmistakable fury as she leaned forward in her chair, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic composure. "Concrete details? You want concrete details about the trauma I endured? About having my mental health dismissed while I was literally contemplating ending my life? About being told my child wouldn't receive security protection because of concerns about how dark his skin might be?" The studio erupted in a flurry of whispered exchanges among the crew, but Stephanopoulos remained laser-focused, sensing blood in the water. "But that's exactly my point," he countered without missing a beat. "In your Oprah interview, you made these explosive allegations, but when asked to identify who made these comments about your son's skin color, you refused to name names. How can the public evaluate the credibility of such serious accusations without specifics? Because unlike some people, I don't believe in destroying families for television ratings," Meghan snapped, her carefully cultivated American accent slipping slightly to reveal traces of the more theatrical delivery that had marked her acting career. "But apparently, that courtesy isn't extended to me." Stephanopoulos consulted his notes again, a gesture that had become as menacing as a rattlesnake's warning. "Speaking of family destruction, let's discuss your relationship with your father, Thomas Markle. He's given multiple interviews claiming you've completely cut him off, refused his calls, and denied him access to his grandchildren. Your own father says you've ghosted him. How is that consistent with the compassionate image you're trying to project?" The question hit like a physical blow. Meghan's composure, already hanging by a thread, began to completely unravel. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the arms of her chair. "My father chose to collaborate with tabloid photographers and sell stories about me to the press. He betrayed my trust in the most public way possible. But he's also said he did those things because it was the only way to get your attention after you stopped taking his calls." Stephanopoulos pressed relentlessly. "He claims he's reached out hundreds of times through intermediaries, begging just to meet his grandchildren. Are you saying a man who walked you down the aisle, who raised you as a single parent, doesn't deserve even a conversation about reconciliation? Don't you dare lecture me about family loyalty." Meghan's voice rose to a level that made the sound booth technicians wince and adjust their equipment. "You have no idea what it's like to have your own family profit from your pain, to see them give interviews designed to humiliate you on the world stage. But isn't that exactly what you did to the royal family?" The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Stephanopoulos had delivered it with surgical precision, his voice never rising above conversational level, making Meghan's emotional outburst seem even more dramatic by contrast. "You went on international television and made damaging allegations about people who, by royal protocol, couldn't defend themselves. You accused them of racism, of driving you to suicidal thoughts, of institutional cruelty. How is that different from what you're accusing your father of doing to you? The parallel hit home with devastating accuracy. Meghan's face flushed red, and for a moment, she seemed genuinely speechless. When she finally found her voice, it carried a venom that made everyone in the studio shift uncomfortably. The difference, George, is that I'm telling the truth about a corrupt institution that protects predators while destroying innocent women. My father sold lies to the highest bidder. Predators? Stephanopoulos seized on the word immediately. Are you referring to Prince Andrew? Because if so, that's a serious allegation to make without evidence. The royal family's handling of that situation has been widely criticized. But are you suggesting they actively protected him at your expense? Meghan realized she'd walked into a trap, but it was too late to backtrack. I'm saying there's a pattern of protecting men while sacrificing women, and anyone with eyes can see it. That's a very serious allegation to make on live television, Stephanopoulos observed, his tone now carrying a subtle warning. Are you prepared to substantiate that claim with evidence? Or are we supposed to take your word for it based on your previous statements, which, as we've established, have been questioned by British courts? The interview had reached a point of no return, and what happened next would leave viewers stunned and create a media firestorm that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. Meghan's face had turned a shade of crimson that makeup couldn't conceal. Her breathing now visibly labored as she struggled to maintain any semblance of control. You know what, George? This is exactly why I left that toxic environment in the first place. I came here in good faith to discuss charitable work, and instead, I'm being ambushed with the same racist dog whistles and character assassination that drove me out of Britain. Stephanopoulos leaned back slightly, his expression remaining unnervingly calm despite the volcanic eruption happening across from him. I've asked you about court findings, family relationships, and substantiation of your public claims. Which of those questions do you consider racist? The entire tone of this interview, Meghan exploded, her voice now echoing throughout the studio as she abandoned all attempts at media training. The aggressive questioning, the refusal to accept my answers, the constant implications that I'm lying. This is exactly the treatment that no white member of any royal family would ever receive on American television. Actually, Stephanopoulos replied with devastating composure, I asked Prince Andrew similarly tough questions about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein when he appeared on Panorama. I asked Bill Clinton about Monica Lewinsky. I asked Donald Trump about January 6th. Accountability isn't racist. It's journalism. The comparison to these controversial figures hit Meghan like a slap. Her eyes widened in shock and fury as she realized she'd just been categorized alongside some of the most scandal-plagued figures in recent history. How dare you compare me to those people? I'm a victim of institutional racism and sexism, not a perpetrator of crimes. But that's the problem, Stephanopoulos pressed, his voice gaining intensity for the first time in the interview. You consistently position yourself as a victim, while simultaneously making serious allegations about others. You want the platform and the influence that comes with your status, but you don't want the scrutiny that comes with it. You can't have it both ways. Meghan shot to her feet so abruptly that her chair rolled backward, the microphone wire stretching taut. This interview is over. I will not sit here and be treated like a criminal for speaking my truth about the abuse I suffered. But whose truth is it really? Stephanopoulos asked, remaining seated but raising his voice to match her movement. The British courts questioned your version of events. Your own family contradicts your narrative. Even some of your former staff members have come forward with different accounts. At what point do we acknowledge that your truth might just be your perspective and not objective reality? The question stopped Meghan in her tracks as she was reaching to remove her microphone. Her face contorted with rage as she whirled around to face him. My perspective? You think my experience of racism and suicidal ideation is just a perspective? You think the threats against my life and my child's life are just opinions? I think you've made very serious allegations that have consequences for real people and institutions, Stephanopoulos replied, finally standing to face her. And when those allegations are questioned by courts, contradicted by witnesses, or challenged by journalists, you deflect to claims of victimization rather than providing evidence. That's not how accountability works in a democratic society. Meghan ripped the microphone from her lapel with such force that the wire snapped, the sharp crack echoing through the suddenly silent studio. This is disgraceful. This is exactly the kind of hostile, racist treatment that I refuse to tolerate anymore. The only thing disgraceful here, Stephanopoulos shot back, his composure finally cracking as his voice rose to match hers, is your refusal to answer legitimate questions about your public statements and actions. You want to be a public figure. You want to influence American politics and culture. But you don't want to be held to the same standards as every other public figure who comes on this show. Production assistants were now visible at the edge of the camera frame, unsure whether to intervene as the confrontation reached its peak. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair and took a step toward the studio exit before turning back one final time. You know what, George? This interview perfectly demonstrates why I had to leave that institution. This is the same hostile, undermining treatment that I received every single day in Britain. The same refusal to listen to women, the same dismissal of our experiences, the same protection of corrupt systems over vulnerable people. Stephanopoulos moved around his desk, following her retreat with his words. And this response perfectly demonstrates why people question your accusations. Instead of answering direct questions about inconsistencies in your story, you deflect to claims of victimization. Instead of providing evidence for your allegations, you attack anyone who dares to ask for proof. Meghan had reached the edge of the set when she delivered her parting shot, her voice carrying across the studio with theatrical projection that reminded everyone of her acting background. History will vindicate me, George, and when it does, interviews like this will be remembered as perfect examples of how the media enables institutional abuse. History requires evidence. Stephanopoulos called after her as she disappeared behind the cameras. And evidence requires more than just compelling television appearances. The studio fell into stunned silence as the sound of Meghan's heels clicking rapidly across the floor grew fainter until they disappeared entirely. Stephanopoulos straightened his tie, returned to his desk, and looked directly into camera one with the unflappable professionalism that had made him a broadcasting legend. We'll be right back after this commercial break, he announced calmly, as if he hadn't just presided over one of the most explosive interview meltdowns in television history. The red recording light finally went dark, but the aftermath of what viewers had just witnessed would continue reverberating through media circles and royal watching communities for months to come, forever cementing this confrontation as one of the most dramatic celebrity interview disasters ever broadcast on live television.